My beloved child, what unfolded last night shook the very foundation of their home. The silence that followed after the truth spilled into the open was heavier than thunder itself. Hearts were racing, eyes frozen, yet no one could find the courage to utter a single word. It was as though every breath in that room was stolen by the weight of revelation. His friend didn't just speak, he tore open the hidden pages of a story long buried. And when the words sank deep into the air, the family sat there, speechless, as if the entire world had stopped. Every glance exchanged between them was sharp, cutting deeper than knives. They realized what they had been blind to for so long, and that blindness shattered in a single instant. What was once hidden in shadows now stood exposed under the blinding light of truth. The pain wasn't just in what was revealed, but in the silence that followed. That silence screamed louder than any voice could. And in that silence, destinies began to shift forever. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 333. But, my beloved child, you must know, this silence was not empty. It was filled with fear, regret, and the unbearable echo of betrayal. Every heartbeat in that room carried the weight of disbelief. No one expected the friend to reveal everything, yet heaven moved him to speak. The family sat, frozen in time, their eyes locked on one another, searching for answers that weren't there. Some trembled, some stared blankly, but all of them knew life would never be the same again. The air grew thick, heavy, impossible to breathe. His words cut deeper than a blade because they were undeniable truths. The lies, the masks, the secrets, all of them burned away in one single confession. And as the truth spread across that room, even the strongest spirit felt weak. The shock was unbearable, my beloved child. They wanted to scream, but no sound came out. They wanted to run, but their bodies wouldn't move. And so they sat there, bound by the chains of revelation, realizing that the life they thought they knew was gone. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 444. My beloved child, that moment was not ordinary. It was divine judgment unfolding before their very eyes. For too long, the truth was suppressed, hidden behind false smiles and broken promises. But heaven has a way of shaking the ground beneath those who pretend. When the truth was spoken, it wasn't just words, it was lightning splitting the sky. Every sentence hit their souls like thunder, waking them from their deep slumber of denial. They finally saw the faces behind the masks they trusted. It was as though the entire family was sitting in a courtroom, and their own hearts were the jury. Each of them replayed past moments, suddenly realizing what they had missed. Every little detail they once ignored now screamed in their minds. And my beloved child, as they sat there speechless, heaven whispered, this was necessary. Sometimes, pain must enter before healing can begin. Sometimes, the truth must cut you so deep that you bleed, so the wound can finally close with honesty. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 555. My beloved child, after that moment, the silence lingered like a heavy fog. No one dared to move, no one dared to breathe too loudly. It was as though their souls had been snatched away, leaving only trembling bodies behind. The truth his friend revealed wasn't just casual words, it was a storm ripping apart the calm. It was lightning striking their home, leaving every wall shaking, every heart breaking. And the family knew, deep inside, that nothing would ever return to the way it once was. Their eyes avoided each other, yet they couldn't escape the weight of the revelation. They stared into the floor, into the walls, into the darkness of the night, hoping to find comfort, but none came. The truth had been released, and it echoed endlessly. And my beloved child, the silence was louder than screams. Their souls cried out, but their lips stayed shut. For deep down, they were too afraid of what would come next. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 666. The mother sat with her hands shaking, clutching her chest as though she could hold her heart together. She wanted to speak, but the words refused to leave her lips. She looked at her son, her daughter, her husband, and her world felt like it was collapsing. The father clenched his fists, not out of anger, but out of helplessness. The truth hit him harder than any blow he had faced in his life. His pride, his authority, his very being felt stripped away in that one instant. The children sat quietly, unable to comprehend how deeply this revelation had shattered their home. They exchanged glances, but no one could find courage to break the silence. It was as if fear itself had chained their voices. And my beloved child, in that silence, heaven was watching. Every tear unshed, every word unspoken, every thought screaming inside them. It was all seen, it was all recorded. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 777. The friend who revealed the truth stood there, his voice trembling, but his courage unshaken. He knew what he had done would change everything forever, yet he couldn't hold back anymore. He spoke not out of malice, but out of duty, as if a higher force guided his tongue. Every secret he revealed cut the family deeper. Memories they once cherished turned into daggers stabbing their hearts. They realized they had been living in a house built on lies, and it was now crumbling brick by brick. The room was thick with despair. It was almost unbearable to sit in that darkness of betrayal, but none dared to move. It was as if the truth had locked them in chains they could not escape. And my beloved child, this was not punishment, it was revelation. Heaven had chosen the right moment to shatter the silence and bring hidden things into light. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 888. The daughter's eyes filled with tears, her face pale as snow. She wanted to scream, but the lump in her throat silenced her. She realized the love she once trusted had betrayed not just her, but the entire family. The son lowered his head, his fists trembling as he battled with rage. Betrayal burned in his veins like fire, but he was powerless to change what had already been revealed. He felt both anger and sorrow colliding within him, tearing him apart. The mother closed her eyes, her lips trembling as she whispered a prayer only heaven could hear. She begged for strength, for courage, for healing, but her heart remained heavy with despair. She never thought she would witness such a night. And my beloved child, the father, once strong, once unshaken, was now broken. His silence spoke louder than any words, his pain etched into every wrinkle of his face. For he knew the truth had destroyed not just trust, but the very soul of his family. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 999. My beloved child, that night stretched endlessly, as though the clock itself refused to move. Every tick of the second hand sounded like a hammer striking their hearts. Time itself seemed to freeze, trapping them inside a prison of truth. No one dared to break the silence, for the silence itself had become a monster in the room. Every breath they took was heavy, every glance was sharp, every memory was shattered. The truth had stripped them of all illusions. The friend who revealed everything stood still, watching the family crumble before his eyes. He didn't speak further, because his words had already ignited the fire. He knew nothing he could add would change the impact of what he had confessed. And my beloved child, the room was no longer just four walls, it became a battlefield of broken hearts. Heaven was watching, waiting to see who would rise and who would collapse under the weight of revelation. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 111. The mother's tears finally escaped, rolling down her cheeks like rivers that could no longer be contained. She whispered her child's name, her voice trembling with grief. But the child looked away, unable to face the storm of emotions. The father's silence grew darker, his mind replaying every conversation, every moment he had overlooked. His pride crumbled under the realization that he had failed to protect his family from betrayal. His hands shook, but he clenched them tight, holding his pain inside. The children sat like statues, but inside, their worlds were collapsing. Betrayal cut their innocence away, replacing it with scars that would never fade. The truth did not just wound them, it transformed them forever. And my beloved child, heaven whispered into the silence, this is not the end, it is the beginning. For sometimes the truth must destroy before it can rebuild. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 222. The friend turned his head slightly, his eyes heavy with guilt. He never wanted to hurt them, but he knew silence would have been a greater crime. His words were meant to save, even if they first destroyed. The air in the room felt suffocating, as though every wall was closing in. No one could breathe easily, the truth had stolen the oxygen from their lungs. The weight of revelation pressed down like chains upon their souls. The mother reached for her husband's hand, but he pulled away, lost in his own world of torment. That rejection cut her deeper than any words could. It showed her that even their bond was fractured by what had been revealed. My beloved child, heaven was not blind to their pain. Every tear, every silence, every hidden cry of their souls was seen by the divine. And though they felt abandoned, they were being prepared for transformation. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 333. The night outside was calm, but inside the house, storms raged in every heart. The moonlight crept through the windows, casting shadows that seemed to dance with their despair. It was as though even the night sky mourned with them. The father finally stood, his legs trembling, his voice breaking. He tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. The only sound that escaped him was a groan of anguish, raw and unbearable. The children flinched at his pain, but none could comfort him. They too were trapped in their own oceans of grief, unable to reach across the waters of betrayal. Each heart was an island, drowning in silence. And my beloved child, this night was not an accident, it was destiny. The truth had to come, and it had to come like fire, burning everything false until only what was real remained. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 444. My beloved child, as the night dragged on, the silence became unbearable. Every second felt like 1,000 knives pressing against their hearts. The weight of unspoken words suffocated the air, leaving them gasping for courage. The truth had already broken their peace, but what hurt more was knowing it could never be undone. No matter how much they wished to turn back time, the words had already been spoken. And those words now lived inside their souls like scars. The mother looked around at her family, her lips trembling as she whispered prayers under her breath. Her eyes carried both sorrow and strength, as though she knew heaven was still watching over them. But her heart was bleeding, and no prayer could stop it from hurting. And my beloved child, the father closed his eyes, wishing it was all a nightmare. But when he opened them, the pain remained. The truth stood in front of him, cruel and undeniable. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 555. The friend shifted his weight, sensing the storm that his words had unleashed. He wanted to step back, to disappear into the shadows, but his conscience held him still. He had done what heaven commanded, he had revealed the truth. Every glance from the family pierced him like arrows. They didn't hate him, but they hated what he had spoken. They knew deep inside that he wasn't the enemy, the truth itself was. The walls of the house seemed to listen, absorbing every silent cry, every heavy breath. That home would never feel the same again. Its walls had witnessed a revelation that tore the family apart. My beloved child, destiny had chosen that night. For truths hidden in darkness cannot stay buried forever, light always finds a way to expose them. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 666. The daughter's tears finally spilled, flowing like rivers that had long been dammed. She pressed her hands to her face, ashamed of what had been uncovered. Her cries filled the room, breaking the silence that had chained them for so long. Her brother reached for her shoulder, his hand trembling with both anger and sorrow. He wanted to protect her, but he too had been wounded by the truth. His heart burned with rage at those who had deceived them. The mother's sobs joined her daughter's, and soon the room was filled with cries instead of silence. What the friend's words had begun, their broken hearts completed. The truth had crushed them all, and yet, it had freed them too. And my beloved child, heaven saw their pain but also their strength. For in the ashes of despair, a new fire of resilience was beginning to rise. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 777. The father finally spoke, his voice hoarse and heavy with grief. We cannot escape this anymore, he said, every word trembling in the air. His declaration cut through the room, forcing everyone to face reality. The friend lowered his head, his heart heavy with regret, but he knew this was the moment the family needed. Sometimes wounds must be opened before they can heal. And though the pain was unbearable, it was the start of something new. The daughter lifted her head, her tear-streaked face glowing faintly under the moonlight. Her eyes, though swollen with pain, carried a spark of strength. She realized that even though the truth destroyed her peace, it also freed her from illusion. My beloved child, heaven whispered in that moment, this is your rebirth. What was taken from you will be restored, but only after you endure the fire of truth. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 888. My beloved child, the weight of the night became unbearable as the truth kept echoing inside their minds. Even when the room was silent, every heart was screaming. No wall, no shadow, no prayer could hide them from what had already been revealed. The father sat back down, his hands covering his face. His shoulders trembled under the crushing pain, a man who once stood tall now broken before his own family. His silence was louder than any words he could have spoken. The mother kept glancing at her children, terrified of what this revelation would do to their souls. She wished she could shield them, but the truth had already pierced them too deeply. Her tears fell endlessly, dripping like rain on the cold floor. And my beloved child, the friend who had revealed it all, knew there was no turning back. Once the light shines on the hidden, darkness has no power to cover it again. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 999. The sun clenched his jaw, fury burning inside him like wildfire. His fists trembled, not because he was weak, but because he didn't know whether to fight the truth or accept it. He wanted to scream, but rage froze him in silence. The daughter buried her face into her palms, shaking with every sob. She had believed in a love that was never real, trusted a bond that was nothing but a lie. Her innocence was shattered, and she was forced to see the world with new, painful eyes. The mother tried to hold her, whispering broken words of comfort. But nothing could erase the sting of betrayal. Every embrace, every word felt powerless against the fire that burned in her heart. And my beloved child, heaven whispered, they needed to know this pain. For only in pain will they find the strength to rise higher than ever before. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 1111. The father finally lifted his head, his eyes red but filled with determination. We must face this, he muttered, his voice low but steady. His words carried the power of a man who had lost everything yet refused to surrender. The friend looked at him, his own eyes wet with tears. He hadn't wanted to be the bearer of such pain, but destiny had chosen him. He had been the vessel through which heaven poured the truth. The room was no longer filled with silence but with an unspoken vow. Every family member, though broken, felt something stir inside them. A fire of resilience began to rise from the ashes of despair. And my beloved child, heaven saw it. The shift from grief to strength, from betrayal to rebirth. What was meant to destroy them would become the very thing that made them unshakable. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 1212. The night outside grew darker, but inside that home, a new light was starting to flicker. It wasn't bright, it wasn't strong, but it was enough to remind them they were still alive. Their pain had not killed them, it had awakened them. The daughter wiped her tears, her hands trembling, but her eyes slowly hardening with resolve. She realized she could no longer live in illusions. She had to face reality, no matter how bitter it was. The son stood and walked toward the window, staring out into the endless night. His reflection looked back at him, broken yet fierce. He knew his path forward would be different, guided by truth, not lies. And my beloved child, in that broken home, angels stood guard. They whispered to each heart. You will heal, you will rise, and nothing will stop the destiny heaven has written for you. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 1313. My beloved child, as the cries softened, a chilling calm returned to the room. It wasn't peace, it was the silence of exhaustion, of souls crushed yet forced to sit in the ruins. The weight of betrayal still pressed on their chests like a mountain. The father's eyes stared blankly at the floor, seeing memories replay like a broken film. Each moment that once brought joy now cut him like shards of glass. He realized trust, once broken, could never return the same. The mother leaned her head back, whispering heaven's name under her breath. Her strength was fading, but deep inside, she held on to faith that this pain had a hidden purpose. She clutched her children closer, afraid of losing them too. "And my beloved child," heaven whispered, "do not fear the breaking, for it is in breaking that you are remade stronger than steel." Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 1414. The daughter finally raised her head, her swollen eyes glistening with both pain and fire. Her voice cracked, but she spoke, "We can't pretend anymore. We have to face what's been done." Her words, though fragile, carried the power of truth. Everyone in the room froze, hearing the strength hidden beneath her trembling tone. She was the one broken the most, yet she was the first to speak courage. The son clenched his jaw, stepping closer to her. His heart raged with anger, but her words reached him. "She's right," he muttered, his voice sharp like thunder. "And my beloved child," for the first time since the truth was revealed, they felt a spark of unity. Though shattered, they were standing together. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 1515. The friend who had spoken everything bowed his head, tears dripping on the floor. He had carried the burden of truth for too long, and now it had been set free. But the guilt of breaking them weighed heavy on his soul. He whispered, "I'm sorry," his voice almost drowned in the silence. But even in that apology, they knew, he had done what was right. For without his words, they would still be trapped in a lie. The father looked at him, his eyes no longer filled with anger, but with a strange mix of sorrow and gratitude. "You did what none of us could," he said quietly. Those words broke the chains of resentment that lingered in the room. "And my beloved child," heaven smiled upon that moment, because forgiveness had started to blossom where only pain had lived. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 1616. The night crept deeper, the moon shining brighter as though it was watching too. Shadows stretched across the walls, wrapping around the family like reminders of everything they had endured. But amidst those shadows, a new light began to glow. The daughter's sobs turned into steady breathing, her chest rising with determination. She knew she had been broken, but she also knew heaven wouldn't leave her in the ruins. Something inside her whispered that a new chapter was coming. The son's hands, once trembling, now steadied. He wasn't going to let betrayal define him. He realized strength is not in hiding pain but in walking through it without breaking. "And my beloved child," the family sat together, not healed, not whole, but awakened. For the first time, they understood the power of truth, no matter how painful it may be. Backhand index pointing right. Type Amen to get blessing 1717. My beloved child, the clock on the wall kept ticking, but for the family it felt as though time had stopped forever. Every sound in the house echoed like thunder, every shadow looked darker than before. The truth had changed the air they breathed, the walls they lived in, the very blood in their veins. The father stood once more, his legs unsteady but his will unbroken. He walked slowly to the center of the room, his eyes sharp with determination. His silence had been heavy, but now his voice carried the weight of 1,000 storms. "We cannot bury this," he said, his tone low but powerful. "What has been done is done, but from this night, we will not live in lies again." His words were not just for his family, they were a declaration to heaven itself. "And my beloved child," heaven leaned closer, listening, marking every vow spoken under that roof. Backhand index pointing right, type Amen to get blessing 1818. The mother wiped her face, her trembling hands finding strength in his words. Though her heart was torn, she saw in him the courage that once made her believe in their bond. She reached for his arm, this time he did not pull away. The daughter's tears slowed, her breathing steadied. She looked at both of them and felt a spark of hope, a small light in the ruins of despair. For the first time that night, she didn't feel entirely broken. The son, still gazing at the window, finally turned back. His eyes were fierce, yet behind the fire was a hidden pain. He nodded once, a silent promise that he too would carry the weight of truth with strength. "And my beloved child," though the storm had shattered them, a new foundation was being laid. From brokenness, heaven was crafting resilience. Backhand index pointing right, type Amen to get blessing 1919. The friends still stood in the corner, afraid to breathe, afraid to exist in their space. He had done what was necessary, but guilt still burned him. He expected them to cast him out, to blame him, to hate him forever. But the mother looked at him, her eyes weary but kind. "You didn't destroy us," she whispered, "the lies did." Those words broke the chains of shame that bound his heart. The father stepped forward, his heavy hand resting briefly on the friend's shoulder. No further words were needed, the gesture itself carried forgiveness. The burden that weighed the friend down lifted like smoke vanishing into the sky. "And my beloved child, forgiveness is not weakness, it is the key that unlocks heaven's blessings." Backhand index pointing right, type Amen to get blessing 2020. The night grew colder, but their souls slowly began to warm. They were no longer just victims of betrayal, they were survivors of truth. And survivors always rise stronger than before. The daughter leaned against her mother, her tears replaced by a steady calm. The pain remained, but so did her spirit. She knew heaven had greater plans than this night of sorrow. The son finally spoke, his voice steady and clear. "We will not let this destroy us," he said, his words like iron. For the first time, his rage had turned into purpose. "And my beloved child," heaven smiled, for the family who sat in ruins was already rising toward destiny. Backhand index pointing right, type Amen to get blessing 2121.